It's the morning star drive on 17.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to the MSD on 117.8. It's Tuesday, May 21st, and so happy for you joining us. And we are ready to start, this week and this day together with the Lord. So subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. How was that impression of Pastor Sky? Right, many of you may have been kind of thrown off because Peace Guy sounds a little different today, right? So actually, we're having a takeover, all the way over in the United States in San Francisco from Eddie Kwan from 2G Talks. I don't know if Peace Guys, mentioned it before on this channel, but it happened kind of suddenly. A couple weeks ago, Pastor Sky asked, whether I would like to try to do a full-length podcast, right? And so he said that over the last 3 years, right, like we've done over 130 episodes of 2G Talks every Monday. And, because we've been really consistent, he wanted to see if this is something that we could give a shot, right? And so obviously both Peace Guy and a lot of people across the world are, hard at work, working on like more and more ways to grow our online ministry and community. So as these platforms get bigger and bigger, and as we, have a greater reach and a greater presence in each person's life, we may have more additions like this, right? So super grateful to Peace Guy, super grateful to the Trinity, and super grateful to our Lord Jesus and our beloved 선생님, and super grateful to each and every one of you, right? So today, we have an exciting podcast for you. I'm not entirely sure yet, what the segment for, these podcast segments will be, but going forward, at least for the foreseeable few months, on Tuesdays, I may be helping out Peace Guy and covering, the Tuesday segments of the MSC on 117.8. So yes, I'm not entirely sure yet. Like, we're trying to think of like a couple series that we can do in terms of the content for these segments. And I'm super excited for it, right? Because every week, we got to know a little bit of each other on 2G Talks and, through the comment sections. And, when I went across the world, I would meet different people, and it was so great to be able to connect, like even to some small degree, based on, our connection to MSC 107.8 and this online world and this online ministry that we're doing. But today there are like specific things we will cover, but I'm not entirely sure yet if this will be the format to follow for the foreseeable few months. So just on that, right? So I don't know if this is gonna be a permanent thing, but talking with Peace Guy, I think this is something that we're gonna do at least until August, because August is around when I'm going to be moving from California all the way to Florida to go to law school. And so Florida is like really like it's one of the furthest places that you can go within the United States in terms of like the distance from California. And so it's going to be a big change. And so I'm not entirely sure yet, because everything's going to be different, right? I'm going to be in school, and I've been out of school for like 5 years at this point. And also, I'm going to be so far from a church, and it's going to be a long time since that's been the case. And of course, I can't say that I'm not like at all worried about that. But I've had a lot of time already to kind of process and to think about, what that's gonna be like. But yes, at least for the next few months, you guys might be hearing my voice on Tuesdays. So today, for our first segment, we're gonna cover a couple things all tied together. Our first thing is we have a new poll for this week, and this poll was actually something that I'm asking too, right? Because Peace Guy asked like, "Hey, do you also have a poll question for this week?" And so he wanted me to take the time out to explain the poll to people because it might seem kind of vague, it might seem kind of odd, and I think this first segment will also tie in based on that poll question. So the poll question is, I don't know if Peace Guy uses verbatim or if he changed it around, but basically is asking, what did God do in your life to prepare you for providence, or like to prepare you to be evangelized, or to prepare you to, meet this history, meet the Lord, or, to listen to the word for the first time. So you can kind of answer it however you please. But this question came to mind because I've been having, conversations and interactions with members this last week that really ties back to, not for me, not when I came to Providence, but like when I like first started listening to the word, and like a lot of callbacks to when I was young and growing up, and like even like as Peace Guy was asking the question, one of my cousins from Korea, she sent me a picture. Right, it's kind of like really like it's so bizarre. I can't remember if it's Dunkin' Donuts or Krispy Kreme, and I don't even know if you guys like, depending on what part of the world you're from, if you guys know what those are. But so those are donut chains, right? And they're both from the United States. But in Korea, I don't know which donut chain it was. Maybe it was Dunkin' Donuts. Maybe it was Krispy Kreme. But anyways, they're having a collaboration with Pokemon, right? So they're having like these Pokemon, themed donuts, and that's kind of whatever. I'm not a huge fan of that kind of stuff because it doesn't really add much, right, to the donut, right? Like it's not like you're making it taste like a Pokemon, right? Like you're not doing anything to it. You're just probably just drawing, one of the characters or drawing a Pokeball on there. But anyway, she saw this and, someone gave her those donuts. And, when I was in Korea, I was talking to them about like how, Pokemon was something that I played a lot like growing up, right? It was the first, video game console that, actually one of our other cousins gave me. And, I'm not going to say that there's a lot that I learned from that, but there's a connection there. And actually, like, even when I've been taking care of the SS, there were like times where, where in the lectures, right, or in the, I won't say I use them in the 30 principles. Sometimes I did, but I would include like images and pictures and like gifs and memes and stuff like that, like in the lecture slides. When when I was teaching like the middle school and high school kids, and sometimes I would throw in like Pokemon slides in there, right? So there's this kind of like this association, right, in AP, and especially those who work with the SS, where they think that I'm like really obsessed with Pokemon, right? So like there's even some like pastors who gifted me like big Pokemon like dolls and other things. And I'm like, it's not that I dislike Pokemon or anything, but I'm not obsessed, to the degree that I think people think I am. But so even in that way, there's like that connection to this thing, and it is something that that was a big part of my life. When I was a child, right? And along with that, there's like movies and books and things that I read growing up. And recently, when I really thought about it, it's not that those things necessarily prepared me for Providence, but there are certain things in Providence that I value more deeply because of things that God did to prepare me through like those kind of influences, like when I was a kid, right? And I think some of the things that we've talked about before, like books that we've read or like movies that we watched. Like I think a couple years back, I like rewatched the Harry Potter series, and like this time around, like this was like I think like it was in the middle of COVID, right? So it's like in the middle of COVID, we went through so much, and then we went through like a lot, like with Sunseem, all the things that he was going through, and then like I started to see like these connections, right, between what was happening in like in our lives and in Providence, and to Sunseem, like to the characters in the movie, right? And then so like. I watched these movies and I read these books like hundreds of times, like growing up as a kid, but it didn't really resonate with me like that. But when I finally watched it after going through these experiences like growing up, I was like crying. I don't know which movie it was. Like it was definitely like towards the fifth and sixth book. And the fifth and sixth movies, like those were like, man, those hit me hard, right? And so there's like some stuff like that, and I've listened to different psychologists and professors like break down like the psychology behind those stories, and there are definitely connections to like real life and connections to like all the things that we go through, right? Like both in Providence and just within life, like for like human beings in general. And so I really see like how God like used like all of these different things like within our lives to prepare us to come to Providence, right? And so that was just one example. But related to it, I write things. There were some options like God used my family or my friends, right? Interactions with them, right? Whether or not they were in Providence to prepare me to come to this history. Or he may have used like, some extenuating circumstances or some blessings too, right? Like whether it's a disease or a new job or going to a certain school, right? Where there's a Providence like church there. But, he had to do something within your life to bring you to this history. And that's what we want to know, right? So that's what the poll question is about, right? And the longer that we live in this history and the longer that we live in life, we're going to see like more and more connections, like exactly what God was doing. And so I hope that, you guys will be able to, spend the time to think about it, to answer that poll, and also to write in the comments below, like specifically what it was, right? Like recently, I've been teaching, and this is something that I've been sharing for the last 6 months, but I've been teaching like the sons of a couple of our JS members from the US and Canada. And like I think this last time, right? And so like this is one of the incredible things about teaching, right? Because the same message you've been hearing over and over and over again, it doesn't hit you until you're in the position to convey that same message to someone else. But there's like something he says a lot to newcomers, and he even says this like I was talking to some JS members in Korea, and he would say this during passing ceremonies, and then like he said this to this person during their passing ceremony, and I think it hit different too because for these people, they heard it live, right? They didn't hear it from a screen, and they didn't hear it from a recording. And so like I was like, wow, like what would it have been like to be there? But one of the things that something he told them is that this is something that we've all probably heard, and that's been cited in the message many times. But he told them, it's not for each of you guys here. You guys may have been brought here to listen to the word through your friends or your family, or like through a club or something like that at school. But it's not those things. It's not those people who called you to this history, but it's God who has prepared you, right? And who is the one calling you to this history. And yeah, like for each of you, you have probably heard that. And I don't know like how like it impacted you when you heard it. But now when I was teaching these boys, I was like, wow, it's so true. It's like it's so incredible, right? It wasn't us. It wasn't even their parents, right, who want to connect them to the church and to the word or things like that. But it's really God, right? It was God. Like, and the more that we look through our own stories and see each of those things, because he uses not just that person, right? Not just the thing in that instant, right? Like something he was coaching recently saying how that like even when we evangelize, right, we have to check people like 2 3 times, right? And he said like don't just like force people to come. And if especially if you can tell that they're not ready, because sometimes like we can like kind of like delude ourselves to thinking like, ah, like this person will probably change when they come, sort of thing. But there are people who are ready, right? And when they come, they do really well. And like just like all the people listening here, they have made it to this point. And when each of us have made it to this point too, right? So there's kind of like a difference, right, between someone who makes it and someone who becomes like someone who we have to kind of drag along for a while. And maybe they do have that big change, right? But like maybe they also become someone who just gives us a hard time for a while, and then don't really fully transition into a life of living that faith, right? But he said to those kind of people, if they're not ready, let them go experience things in the world, and pray for them so that God will prepare them through their life, so that they will come to a point where they want to listen to the word and want to come to Providence on their own, right? And that's also something that we've seen too, right? But so really from that, it tells us that God prepares us through our life, right? Like even in like in the past, right? Even through Jeremiah 1:5, it said, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, right? And so this is like something that conceptually that we talked about many times, but I really hope that people will, and each of us listening will see how this hits in reality, right? That before we were formed in the womb, that's not just a matter of speech, but God really means that, right? God is saying to us, you, before you were even made in the womb, I set you apart, right? Like to be part of this history, right? And that's such an incredible thing, right? And so I was like talking to one of our church reps here, and he was saying that like for him, like he grew up in the United States, right? But there was a part of his life where something asked him to go missionize at his uh, uh not his country of origin, but like where his family came from, right? And so, I won't go into details of who and where that is, but so something told him to do this, so he went back to his like parents' like country, and when he was there, he also, of course, connected with his parents' family, and like both on his mom and father's side, and he saw really just how God prepared him, right? Just how God, before he formed this person, this church rep in the womb, how he prepared like his mom's side of the family and his dad's side of the family so that he could be born and like so that he could have the foundations that he needed to come to Providence. I really hope that everyone sees how deep this is. So yes, so that's what the poll is, and that's also going to be like what our first segment is about. But before we do that, let's go into our first break for today. And so some of you guys may have heard this song before, but this is something that Pastor Sky suggested. So our first break for today, we're gonna listen to a song from the Sumney Boys, and it's really crazy too, because they're also someone who had been with this channel. Of course, they didn't just make music for MSD 117.8, but they've helped out, Pastor Sky, and they've been with us really from episode one, right? So they've been with us for over 1,000 episodes. So as you guys may have heard some of their songs already, they released a new album like not too long ago, I think less than 3 weeks ago. So we'll be playing one of their songs today. And so before we go into the break, like even talking about the Sumney Boys too, I think I've learned a lot of things from them as well. And I remember I went to, one of their, weddings, right? We know that Andrew got blessed, a couple of years ago, and it's a great event that, people in American Providence attended too. And it was interesting, right? Because the like when we were talking about his wedding, like he and I were texting, and he was saying like that there's only one thing that he needs, like, the people of Providence who are coming to his wedding to do, right? Like, and I don't know, like for you guys, like what you guys might think that is, right? Like if a Providence member invited you to their wedding, like what do you think they would ask, right? And so this is kind of funny because the one thing that he asked was for us to dance at the wedding, right? So that's kind of funny, right? And so I think I immediately kind of knew what he was getting at, and so that's something that I'm deeply appreciative about Andrew. Like, he and I haven't like had a whole lot of time to spend together, because we live so far apart. But in like the times that we've shared, like I could really feel this connection with Andrew, and so I really kind of understood where he was getting at. But like it was an event where a lot of his family and his friends, like not in Providence, are coming to celebrate their marriage, right? So he said, let's not be weird, right? Let's show like them that, like, Providence are, these people are very welcoming, and they know how to have fun, right? And they also know how to just like how to be normal, right? It's not to say that, like, not dancing is abnormal, but yeah, he just wanted us to like make it so that other people would feel connected to us too, right? Like if anything to be said. But the reason why I want to share this part of the story and this about the Sumney Boys, which I really liked, was I think the time before that we got to watch them have a live like a live concert at the Houston church for, I think it was for a second gen retreat. So we had a second gen retreat, and they had that at the same time. So like one of the events we had during the second gen retreat was to go watch their concert at the church. And it was a really great time, right? It was like really so hyped up. And I remember like even during that, we were trying our best to be hyped up and go crazy, and like, making an exciting time for Andrew and for our beloved Michael Jr., and like all the members who were performing during that time. And I think both of these examples, like both Andrew's wedding and like this concert, right? Like where we're hyping each other up, like because in Providence we don't really do some of those things, right? We don't really like dance, right? Like, do you do you guys like dance at a wedding, right? Like, especially given like the culture like nowadays, right? Like, it's like worldly music, right? And like not the Somni Boys music, but the wedding music, right? Because it's intended for like all people, like not just people in Providence. So there's a lot of worldly music going on. So I don't know when the last time you guys have like thrown down on a dance floor, but for Andrew, we gave it our all and we danced on the dance floor. But part of that experience, like both the wedding and the concert, it really showed me like how I want to support, right, the people of Providence, right? The moment Andrew said like this is the one thing that I need from you guys, I was like, don't worry, bro, like say less, that's all you needed to say, like we will do that, right? And so like this is also something I talked about even from my like friend's wedding, like from the world, like a couple weeks ago, right? Like like myself, like I wouldn't like go out and dance. Like actually, like I know Peace Guy likes to dance like in those kind of events, but like that's not really my thing. But if it's for someone else, and if it's for someone in Providence, and if it's for our brothers and sisters, in one way, this is like putting our life on the line to make it so that we're supporting each other, right, through whatever it is. And so, like even at the concert too, right, because we're not really used to like rap music and like like pop music and hip hop, like within Providence, right? So it could have been awkward. Like people could have just stood there, right? Especially like the older folks, the adults who were listening, they could have just done that. But like this is also one of the ways where I was like, okay, we have to really hype everyone up. We have to be the hype man for for the Sunny Boys, and this is something that we do just to show each other support. So I hope that this is something that we can do, like not specifically dancing, not specifically being a hype man, but supporting each other in this way, right? In the endeavors that we have, and by listening to the MSC 117.8, that's exactly something that we're doing with Peace Sky and for the people behind the team of MSC 117.8 and the things that go on, right? Like for like internet ministry and all these things, right? So like I'm really thankful for everyone's support, and I hope that we too can support the future endeavors that all of you guys will have in the respective fields that you have in Providence. But with this, we'll go into the first break for today, with the Somni Boys new song.
I'ma make this short and sweet. Your time is done. You had your chance. You're finished. I'm going to the end, I don't quit, I'ma make it. Can see the finish line, I can feel it, I can taste it. Everything I say, I just do, I don't fake it. Your time is up, we're going all the way until the end.
It's not too late. Are you giving up already? Check it out. Here we go. It's not too late.
You chose this path cause you thought it was right for you. You can't give up right now when you know what you gotta do. Until the end, until the end, until the end. You chose this path cause you thought it was right for you. You can't give up right now when you know what you gotta do. Until the end, until the end, until the end. This the path of love I chose from the start. This the path of love forever I walk. Man, thoughts are never enough, so I put you in my mind, yup, with every single thought. Even when I stumble, find my way up to the top. Coming to reach higher levels, I can never stop. It's so easy to lose everything, but what's great about life is you can get it back. The type of life you want, you really have to make it. Give your heart, will in life, you will take it. This path of love, I'll never change. I guarantee you, I will stay the same. This a real love, no plastic. This a true love, not basic. So now we're going up to the end, to the end, hey. So now we're going up to the end, hey, hey. You chose this path cause you thought it was right for you. You can't give up right now when you know what you gotta do. Until the end, until the end, until the end. You chose this path cause you thought it was right for you. You can't give up right now when you know what you gotta do. Until the end, until the end, until the end.
Yes, so that was the Something Boys new song Until the End. You guys may have heard it before, and maybe Pastor Skies played it for you guys too. But they have, other songs from that album, so definitely go check it out before. Actually, for our second break from today too, later, as we listen to, we're also gonna listen to another song from the Somni Boys, but this is gonna be a throwback, right? It's gonna be like the first song that was featured on episode one of the MSC 117.8, right? Because, one of the things that I did to like prepare for today's recording and for this segment was to go back and listen to like the first ever episode of the MSC 117.8, right? Like back from 2020, right? And it was on March 17th of 2020. So it was like right after 316. And so like Pastor Sky, was just starting out with this channel. Like I forgot specifically like what he said for the motivation behind why he was starting this channel. But it was to like specifically he said to discuss both physically and spiritually all the things that are going on in this history. And who knew at that point that this would be something that would happen, that would stick around until this day. So and like with that, right? I know one of the reasons why so many people are still listening and are actively involved in this channel is because it's gone through that length of time, right? And like Peace Guy is someone who like with these kind of ventures that he takes on, right? He really goes until the end, right? Like just like what the song said. But really, like I think we can really see how much he's like learned from something about this mentality of going until the end. And so I hope that each of us can like really adopt that mentality right within our daily lives too, right? Like I really saw like the value of working together with him, and not just that of like really learning about that aspect of providence, right? Like not just through him, but all of the members whom we've been interacting with and whom I got to meet like as sort of as a consequence to the MSC 7.8, like who we got to know like deeper, right? Like we've had like different segments on here, different guests, and there was a while where like Peace Guy was doing like interviews with people, like members across the world about how they were evangelized, and through those stories, like we learn like an aspect about someone who like that we may not have known before, right? And so I'm really grateful for all those things because like it's and I think one thing that we can say about Peace Guy, we can say about all the people like who are listening and all the people of Providence is we try not to make the world in our image, but we really want to make the world in the Lord's image. Right. And we want to make it in the image of like, what Sunday has taught us, right? What he's shown us, right? What the man of mission has done. But through each of us and through each of us, like, because we're all unique individuals, we get to see like particular elements, right? Particular like sides to that, right? Like some people are like just, nice beyond measure, and right, and that's like a quality that they have. Some people are like super energetic, and they like have like both like I don't know how you would describe Peace Guys, like how he goes to the end, right? But he has a consistency and a competitiveness that comes from like how he was raised and how he grew up, and like the qualities that God both embedded him with and that he has developed over time too, right? And so each of us like have a different quality, but through the things that like each of us shine in, I think we see a different aspect of the Trinity, and we see a different aspect of the Lord, right? And so the goal is to like work on the parts of ourselves that maybe aren't so great, and also to make the parts of ourselves that God has given us as a blessing like shine even more. But each of us are to make ourselves like in the Trinity's image, right? In Jesus's image, right? In like the image that the person that God is using in this time period has like shown us like what he desires from each of us. And so yes, with this we'll go into today's like first kind of official segment, but this is like tied to kind of like the poll question. And so when I was like talking with Peace Guy about like what kind of things to talk about for Tuesday, I think based on the questions that he kind of gave me, he was pretty much saying like, people want to know more about each other, right? Especially within Providence, right? And so I think over, right, like over the 130 episodes that we have of like 2G talks, like I've talked about like different elements, different aspects, and different things going on in day to day. But like I think there's some things that I haven't been able to fully express, right? And there's also like part of our stories that's like hard to capture, right, in like a short time frame. And so I think I wanted to spend like at least today to like open up a bit more about growing up in Providence and like these like the stories like from our youth, right? Like and like we talked about this right before the break, talking about the poll, right? Like God has done so much in our life, and like we even mentioned that Pastor Scott used to do these interviews with members, and some of you guys listening may have done those interviews too, or like, or definitely may have listened to those interviews, right? But the crazy thing is, right, like if you even remember when those interviews were done, how much have you changed, right, since those interviews? Right, like maybe some people not so much, but one of the things about Providence is that we're constantly changing, right? We're constantly doing things in a new way, right? And like things have changed so much this year from last year, from the year before, that there's no way that we haven't changed, right? So even from the time that I did that interview with P Sky, I think so much has changed. And like even at that moment, like when we did that interview, it was like in the peak of COVID, right? So there are definitely new things that have happened. But even more so than that, like I think with the time that's gone on, we look at the things that happened in the past, even through a different lens, right? And like I really see that, some of the takeaways that I had and some of the lessons that I held on to from like my past experiences were so much shallower than like maybe some of the things that I realized today, like based on those same experiences, but looking back even further. So I wanted to share some of those things, and related to this, like I'll get into like two stories for today, right? And this first story, it was actually a testimony that I shared recently, last week. I've been teaching, two newcomer boys, two JS's kids from Canada, and it's been a really great time. And so I was teaching them this week about Noah and the flood. But then the previous week we actually did purpose of creation in the fall. So that's kind of an interesting order, right? It's like, we typically tend to teach Noah and, the lesson of the flood and about judgment like earlier, right? And whereas like purpose of creation is like way at the end. But last year when we were teaching these boys, like we were trying to crank out as many lessons as possible, like within 2023. So we like covered like all the core lessons. So we have kind of like a lot of like going backwards and like covering like the previous lessons to do. And we tied it in a way where it made a lot of sense. Well, at least I hope so. Because like when you look at purpose of creation in the fall, right, that's covering like the first like 5, 6 chapters of Genesis, and then Noah's story is covering like chapters like 6 through 9 and 10, right? And so like it kind of like happened chronologically, and then so we were like kind of like covering like, oh, like what happened as a consequence of the fall, right? Like what, like from like two people committing the fall and from breaking God's purpose of creation, like how then did it go from like to people on a large scale, right, at Noah's time, right? Because it said everyone was sitting at that time. But like when I was like sharing this lesson, I was like, okay, because they've like learned these advanced lessons already, even though like we tend to think of Noah and the flood being an elementary lesson, like I need this to hit deeper. Like I need them to understand like just like that principle of miniaturization from Adam and Eve to magnification to like everyone at Noah's time in that entire region and stuff like that. And so like one thing that I've tend not to do within the last few years in teaching was not to use my personal stories. And there's like times where I think that's good and times where I like don't like to do that. But with these boys in particular, I didn't really tell my stories. But and like I think even on the MSC 117.8, like there's also kind of a limit to which I'm like, really just spilling out like all of my stories and experiences. Cause there's like, I don't know, like I know this might sound kind of silly, but there's a part of me that wants to distance myself from like what's the truth, right? Like giving like what I know to be the word. So taking myself out of that, like taking like my personal experiences, like in subjectivity, like out of that, right? And trying to give like what's objective, trying to give what's true. But, like in part of what we talked about, even like thinking about like the movies that we enjoyed as a kid, like Harry Potter and other things too. And even with our relationship with Sonsingnim and our relationship with, the Trinity and with each other, right? Those are all story based, right? So I was like, okay, there's a power to story, so I have to tell these things. And so we'll get a little bit more into that too, and like the power of our stories and why stories are important, right? Because like if some from what you guys may know about Peace Guy too, like Peace Guy is like super into stories, like even in like lecturing too, right? He uses stories too, and like actually it was like recently when I was like watching like one of the episodes of the Rebel pastor, right? Like when he was like telling a story while he's explaining this lesson, I was like, okay, I see the power behind the story. But I still do think that okay, if you're gonna use stories, they have to be true stories, right? Not true in the fact that it's not a made up story, but even if it's a made up story, like a fictional narrative, like Harry Potter and other things, right? You can't like distort the objective truth. That you can't distort the lesson. You can't like make up a fake kind of a truism at the end of it, right? So the moral has to be deep and true. Right, so like with these boys, right, like after teaching them about purpose of creation in the fall, and after teaching them about Noah, or like going into the story of Noah, I told them like a story of like why like I started really to look differently at this word, right? And like when I started paying attention to it, because I I know what it's like to be in their position, right? Like they're young boys, right? They're one of them he's like 16, and the other one's I think like about 14 now. So they're really young, right? So I remember learning these lessons at that age, and like when I learned it in like middle school and elementary school and high school, like it it's not to say it didn't hit me deeply, but there's only so much I could really know, right? Because there's only so much of life that I've really experienced, right? So I think like one big difference was like when I was in like middle school, I started to like make a lot of friends at school. But like, when you think about like how kids are at middle school, right? Like sure, there are some, bad cookies, but for the most part, like, these are middle school kids, right? Like they're they're all like, kind of innocent to a certain extent, like the things that they get up to, the interests that they have, it's all kind of childish and innocent. And so we kind of like tend to view children being like not as like maybe inherently wicked right, as adults, right? Not to say that that's true or not, but like so when I like saw my friends in like early middle school, like I was like, I know there's a difference between us in Providence and these kids, but it's like hard to see, right? It's I mean, of course, like, it is easy to see, but but these kids, like, they still seem to be like good people, right? Even though like they don't believe in God, even though they don't go to church, even though they don't listen to the word, like they seem like they're living more or less like a decent life, right? And so, of course, like I think that to that degree is understandable, and many of you guys may have the same feeling about your friends in the world, and or like the friends you had growing up. But I remember like the reason why I started to tell these story to these boys was I remember like when they started to develop a difference. Right. And now that I'm like way past like high school, I see this difference and I see where things end up. But at the time, it was hard to see. And so this story wasn't really for them necessarily like right now, but it's something that I hope that they remember like in the future, right? Even for themselves, that they'll see as they experience life and as they use the lens of the word to kind of dissect what's happening in their life, right? So, like one of the things that I mentioned on 2G talks before, but I wasn't really able to go in depth with it since it's a much shorter segment. But one of the kind of analogies or parables that I think it was my uncle who said it to me when I was in Korea was that when you release two arrows like a couple of angles apart, right, a couple centimeters apart, when you first release them, they're like, they're really close, right? You can't really tell that they're far apart. It's only when they keep traveling far down and when they hit their target that you see how far apart that they land, right? So even for us too, right? When we're kids, like for us within Providence, I think we can see a big difference between like our kids who are raised in Providence and the kids that we have. but like sometimes it's like hard to like really see, like especially from the people in the world's perspective, right? Many of them like can't see like our value, and they can't see like what makes our life different, right? Even though we know clearly, and the people who in the world whose eyes are open, they can see clearly too. But I remember in high school, right? Like, so as I said, like in middle school and high school, I started to make a lot of friends. And I was like really like sifting through them, like checking what kind of people they were, and really looking carefully at them. And I was trying to see the difference between us and them. Right. And then I remember, right, this is about like junior year of high school. So like year 3 of high school. And I realized this after going to Korea, but like not all, school systems are the same, right? So in America, like depending on where you are, like there's 4 years of high school, right? So I was in the third year, right? The penultimate year. And at that time, and like even leading up to that, many of my friends were dating around, right? So like the guys would have girlfriends, and the girls would have boyfriends, right? And so that's something that we've had to deal with, right? Like from like as early as middle school, even maybe elementary school, right? Like kids dating each other and like being around that. But yeah, at this point in junior year, it was like such a common thing, right? For my friends to have, someone that they were dating. And like one aspect of that, like like something that happened like as a result of that in junior year of high school, was I had like this really close friend, who I had like 4 or like 5 of my like entire like schedule for that day, right? So if we had like 6 classes, I had like 4 or 5 of them together with this guy, right? So I was seeing him like all day, and he started to date this girl, and he was like this kind of person who like he didn't really like girls first, and of course, like he probably did have crushes and stuff, but he never acted on like his crushes or like the interest that he had. But when a girl expressed interest in him, he was like suddenly like super into her, right? And so he started to date this girl because she liked him first, right? He was like so excited, right, that someone likes him, and so he started to date her. But like the more that we got to know her, like this girl had a lot of problems, right? Like one of the biggest problems that I saw, and hopefully none of the members here subscribe to this belief, but like I think especially like as a Providence person, this is really troubling. But she didn't have a great relationship with her parents. Like from what I could see from like outside looking in, like I don't think her parents like really treated her that badly. But for her, like she like hated her parents, right? So one of the things that she used to tell us in passing is that she wants to ruin her life so that her parents feel like bad for how they raised her. And I was like, that is a terrible like kind of a mentality to have, right? And so yeah, like I mean, like yeah, people can like respond differently to even that situation, but like even in that, I was like, at the time I was thinking like, like if you really have this terrible relationship with your parents, like shouldn't you try to succeed or something like on your own and try to make your own life and kind of detach yourself from them, like if that. But anyways, like this is the kind of girl that she was, right? So she had a lot of problems. And so like as they were dating, like there were like a lot of like these kind of like red flags, and there were like a lot of these issues. And then I remember like starting from like one of the school dances that we have, like the proms that we had, right, in junior year. um like we're all underage, right? Like within the US. And so we're all underage, but like at that time there were kids who are like consuming alcohol, and smoking and like doing these kind of things, and committing the fault too. And so she like started to drink alcohol with like some of her other friends, right? And this is behind her boyfriend's back, like without telling her, right? So it was just like with Adam and Eve too, right? It's not just that they sinned, but they like deliberately hid it from God, and they deliberately, she deliberately hid it from her boyfriend, and so he found out about it from someone else, right? And so that was like even more painful for him, right? And so she started to do that, and like so they had a lot of problems, and they went through this issue. And then like shortly thereafter, she cheated on him like with his best friend at the time. Right, so that's pretty bad, right? And so like even as a high school student, Like, and as someone like within Providence and as a second gen in Providence, I was like, wow, this is so stupid. But given like what we like learned about people and all the things that, all the word that we've been listening to for like at that time, like for the last 16, 17 years, I think it kind of like helps you develop this spiritual sense and a sense of how to like look at people and kind of gauge people. And also just like life experience too, right? So I was like I could kind of see this happening, right? And like honestly, right, some of the red flags I mentioned, even the drinking thing, is probably like a precursor to this, right? And so, when she cheated on him with his best friend, it like all hell broke loose in school. Right. So I'll kind of like wrap up the story like slowly here. Like there's like a lot more to this too. But like this was like a shocking place where like I saw a huge difference between like Providence and the world, right? Like, and this is like at an early age, but there's like so much that happened as a result of this. And so like one of the terrible things that happened was like this pulled in everyone from our school, at least within our grade, right? Like, and so this is like such a strange thing, right? Like, it wasn't just between my friend and like and his girlfriend and the guy they cheated on, but like this whole like everyone had an opinion, and everyone's opinion was to cast the first stone, right? And everyone's opinion, like they had an opinion about this, about like, oh, like you should do this to that girl, or you should do this to your friend, who did this with your girlfriend. And like they were all terrible, terrible things. And that was like when I saw like what these people were thinking on the inside, right? What my friends were thinking on the inside, right? And this was like when everything came out to the surface. And so from around that time, I mean, this wasn't the this wasn't what made me go to church, but this is like one of the things looking back that I think played a pivotal role. And like, it was built on like years of like these interactions and these relationships with these people, right? And so like from this, I like start to see like the difference of living according to faith. Right. And so like and I'm really glad for this. And I talked about this before, but from that point on, I started to go to church like by myself, right? And like at the time, like San Francisco church had moved like quite a bit in the time that we've lived here, and like we've lived in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so it started originally at this place called Hayward. Actually, no, there was like some moves before that too, but that place was maybe like a 10-minute drive, a 15-minute drive from where I live. So it was like super close, right? But that location, like growing up, it had a couple break-ins. And so, like people at that time, they kind of clamored to move to like a safer place, right? So we moved to like a much further place that by car at that time, I think it would have taken us like 45 minutes to an hour, right? And so I wasn't driving yet at that time. And like we moved a couple times like here and there. And so like finally, like around the time when I was a junior, we moved to a place that was like, if by car it would have been like 25 minutes, maybe half an hour, but by taking public transportation, and walking, I want to say that it took me well over 2 hours, right? 2, 3 hours to get to. And like, I think no one, like, especially in the US, like, no one would ever expect an SS or a second gen to make that kind of trek to go to church, right? And I also see another aspect of this too, right? If my parents had tried to make me do that, like, can you imagine that, right? Like, if a parent, like in Providence, like told like a child to go by themselves, and like to take public transportation to go to church and to listen to the word. Like, what kid would do that? Right? Like if their parents are forcing them to, right? So it has to come out of a place of willingness, right? Like my parents could have never forced me to do that. If my mom caught wind of that and she had even said an encouraging thing like, "Oh yeah, like that's good, like you should keep doing that," I think I would have stopped, right? Because that's like kind of the place where teenagers are at, right? Like at this place of rebellion. But yeah, that's when I started to go, like taking, public transportation, right, all the way. And I think I've told you guys that funny story, but if you guys haven't heard it before, like there was a time where like I got to church, right? And it was like midday and it was hot and I was like walking. And I think I didn't really have a lot of our like church leaders like contact information at that time because I was like 15 or 16. And so I was like just waiting for the church to open, not knowing that they were like some of the church leaders were already inside, right? And like we had kind of like a double door situation. So even if I knocked on the first door, I don't think anyone would have heard it. So I was like waiting outside on this bench, like outside of this bus stop, and it was like hot, right? And there's no shade. So I like had like my jacket over my face and I was like lying down on this bench. And I think I like even fell asleep at some point too. I was just like waiting for the church to open. And then like later on, like one of our pastors, like it turned out he was in there the whole time. And there were actually like multiple leaders in there the whole time, right? But he like didn't open the door because he thought I was a homeless person, right? Because there's no one else who would be there at that time. But that's like a fond memory that I have, and it's something that I've shared before. But it's starting from that time that I really started to listen to the word. And so, that was like part of high school, and there's kind of like a second part of the story, like, but like where things went from there, like from high school to college and all the things I experienced there. And so like that part of the story I'll share in next week's segment, because I think already like even just this one story from high school took some time. But yes, like I was started to see this difference, and I started to see like now, like looking back on it, recounting these things, I really see all the things that God did in my life to bring us to this point, right? To bring us to this point where, like on every weekend, I'm recording something for 2G Talks, for MSC 7.8, working together with a Peace Guy, working together with all of you, working together with the leaders at my church and the members, doing things with the SS, like teaching, these JS kids, right? Like if you had asked me like back in 2014, 2015, like when I was graduating from high school, like if I expected to do any of those things, no, like no way. There's no way in hell that I would have like thought that I would do any of these kind of things. And I know for a fact that that's the same case with each and every one of you guys, because I've heard those words come out of each person's mouth before. But I really want to not just hear everyone's stories, but to have everyone share their stories with each other, right? And so I really hope that, in short, that you guys can, write down in the comments below, like what kind of experiences that you had, whether it's with your family or your friends, whether it's like connections to like books or media, or even like things that you grew up with, like hobbies that you had, sports, like whatever it is, like what did God use to bring you to this history, right? Like, and not just like physically bring you, but like really like from a deep psychological, like soul level or spiritual level way. Like what did he do to bring you to this history? So that's the poll for this week. And so we're going to go into our second break for today and have like a final short segment. And yes, as I mentioned, for the second break, it's going to be another song from the Somni Boys, and it's going to be the first song that was ever like used as a spotlight and as a break for this segment. So this is by the Somni Boys featuring Mariah, and it's Together with the Lord.
We believe in the same God, but we are on different levels.
Put your hands in the sky if you feel alive. All the stories that we made, just you and I. Never losing all the passion. All this love is my obsession. Oh my gosh, this feeling got me heat stroke. His love like a billion pots about to heat though. I ain't never breaking from this bond, cause you and I are only one.
If you ain't living with the Lord, then who you with?
Who you with?
If you ain't living with the Lord, then who you with?
Who you with? Hey.
주와 함께 together with the Lord every day, all day. 주와 함께 together with the Lord all day, all day. 주와 함께 together with the Lord every day, all day. 주와 함께 together with the Lord all day, all day.
Together with the Lord, I'm living my best life. Don't worry about a thing, it's only sunny life. We sing about memory stories that we share. We'll fall deeper in love as we stop and just stare. My eyes only on you. They sparkle with love, don't forget my charm too. There will never be another, live this life only for you. I give you this promise that I will hold true.
If you ain't living with the Lord, then who you with?
Who you with?
If you ain't living with the Lord, then who you with?
Who you with? Hey.
주와 함께 together with the Lord every day, all day. 주와 함께 together with the Lord all day, all day. 주와 함께 together with the Lord every day, all day. 주와 함께 together with the Lord all day, all day.
We believe in the same God, but we are on different levels.
Yes, so that was Together with the Lord by the Summoning Boys featuring Mariah, and I'm so ecstatic for like them continuing to make music, like even until to this day, right? Like from where they started off and what they've been doing. And so with that, our final segment for today, and this too might change as we go forward, like just says how Past Skies like kind of opened the door and like had other people kind of contribute to MSC 117.8 and to these online platforms. I hope to do the same thing too. Like, I've already had many thoughts before about like, oh, like I wish I could have this person contribute to 2G talks, or like if I could interview this person or hear more from this person too. And so I like going forward in the future, this part might be a special segment from someone else, right? Especially because I'm doing so much talking otherwise too. But related to the Somni Boys, related to this, and related to a couple other things, and related to stories too, today I wanted to kind of like briefly talk about at the very end about creativity in Providence, right? And about stories within Providence. And this is really coming from me like recently, because something was talking about like writing books, right? Like people in Providence writing books, and like actually like this topic, like, and this is me being like completely honest here. I do not give this much kind of like emotion, I don't express like this much, right? Like from like normally, but I was so excited when something was talking about like writing books, and like even that I didn't express it at the time, but I really hope that this is something that many members will be able to do, and not just write books, but yeah, but come up with songs like and testify for Providence in all of these different ways. But really the topic of books is something that's just so near and dear to my heart, right? And like the truth of the matter is like I don't know where you cut off, like at what, like how much someone has to read for you to say like someone reads a lot versus someone who doesn't. And I want to say that like I don't know if I read a lot. Like I don't know if I can say that I read a lot, but I have been reading like a lot recently, and I've been talking to different members. I was talking to Pre-Pastor Jusong, or Pre-Pastor Sean, and he's someone who reads a lot. And with him, I had this conversation even about listening to audiobooks. So even when I drive, like I'm listening to books now rather than like listening to music, right? Especially like worldly music. Right? Sometimes I still do, but I opt listen more to listening to books because you know yes, sometimes it does make me like concentrate less, but at other times it actually helps me to concentrate better because I'm actively using my mind to like listen to something, and it helps me to concentrate more too. And more than that, it just like feels like such a better use of my time, right? Rather than just using the time like commuting, like just listening to music and stuff like that. But yeah, so like recently I've been reading a lot of books, and even in the very beginning, I mentioned things like Harry Potter, like Pokemon, like each of these things. And so I've seen the power of stories like play out in our lives, and like even the same thing for like with music too, right? Like for the Somni Boys and for like all the other people within Providence who want to make music, right? You guys listen to a song from Mason and like some of from our members over in Africa too, right? Like with the songs that they have made. And so, we want to express these things. And so, I'm really excited to talk about this thing about writing. And so, like, I'll be honest, there has been something that I've been working on for a very long time, like since college. But I've never really had the confidence to like really work on it full time, to just like throw myself into it and be like, okay, I'm gonna like give this an actual shot, right? But yeah, like I think stories are really powerful. And so like there's like kind of like this like I don't know how much to share, but there's a novel that I want to write, and I want to use all the things that we've learned in Providence and all the things that we've experienced, like growing up. Like for me, growing up, like at from all the way from like childhood to like high school and then a college and beyond, and contain it like within a story. But then at the same time, like we also, I really do want to write stories like about something and testify for him, right? Because that's specifically what he asks us to do too, right? So like my mind's a little bit all over the place like right now with regards to that, but I really hope that this is something that each of us can do. And to like kind of to end this segment off, right? Like to demonstrate like a part of the story, like I had like one other thing to share, and this is something that I think I probably said in passing on another episode of 2G Talks, like right after I came back from Korea. But I don't know if I really got to emphasize the story aspect of this that makes this really powerful, right? And so this is regarding the medicinal spring water that we have. It's specifically the one like the one that everyone thinks of, the one by the grass lawn. And like if you go to Wanmyeongdong and you go to that medicinal spring water, like next to it there's a rock with an inscription on it that talks about the story, right, of the medicinal spring water, right? And so I have no idea at what point that was like put in place, if that was like there from the very beginning. But you do have to wonder, like, when did people start to drink this water, right? Like what do we need to um like um know about the medicinal spring water, right? And so like this is even to tie into like how do we explain like the properties of the medicinal spring water to people, right? Do you just say that it's really good water, right? Does that encapsulate like what is truly happening? And like so actually that inscription answers all those questions, right? So I hope that even going forward in the future, like if you have the occasion to give this to someone who's sick, and you want to use it like even as a tool for evangelism, or like you just really want to emphasize the importance and the value, right, of the medicinal spring water to someone, that you can look at that inscription too. And I have a picture of it, and like for anyone who's been there, you guys will know what I'm talking about. So I hope that you guys will take a look at that going forward in the future. But on that inscription, like maybe I'll pull it up in a bit too. So the inscription on the rock next to the spring water, it talks about the story about this woman, right? And so it says this medicinal water isn't something that cannot that can be replicated by medicine, or that can be like manufactured, right? Like, but this is a divine gift from God, right? So specifically, it talks about a woman. I'm not really sure. It doesn't say who she is, but it says that Jesus appeared to her like when she was dreaming, like and like specifically like talking to her about Warmingdong, and she said, like, isn't there like a spring, right, in the yard, right, in the sports field, like over there, right? And so he said, like, Jesus told this woman that this spring is a spring where your teacher used to like wash himself and pray for a long time, and he used to drink and wash from this spring. He said, if you drink from this water, your body would be healed. And so like when this woman heard this, she got up and she drank from the spring, and she like bathed herself in it, and an illness that like she could not get treated for like over 12 years was like mysteriously and completely cured. Right, so from that, like the people, like from that time, like the people who heard this story, who knew about it, they started to drink from this water, and over like tens of thousands of people experienced recovery from both major and like minor kind of afflictions. But the part of the inscription that I really want to share was this, right? It says, those who wish to drink this medicinal water must sincerely pray to God about their circumstances before doing so. Right, this medicinal water serves as, I had a friend translate this, but it says it serves as a conduit for God's deep and mysterious will, manifesting, signs and miracles through this water. So basically, it's saying, tell God your story, like when you drink this water, right? Like, and know that this water, it cures you, and because God is like showing that sign and that miracle through this water, right? So the last part of this inscription, it says, of course, the water is pure and it's rich in minerals, but it's not those properties alone that affect your healing. Like, rather, it is through God's divine interventions that the miracle of healing comes to those who believe, right? So thus, regardless of the ailment, if God's divine sign is present, then you will be healed, right? So it was saying, like, really know where the healing comes from, right? The healing doesn't come from the minerals and the properties of the water, but the healing comes from God, right? From God granting that thing too. And so something he said to people, like after people started drinking this, and nowadays it's just like everyone wants some, right? But he said the reason why people are not healed is because they don't understand the value. They don't know where the healing is coming from. They don't know that it's God doing it. They just think that it's the minerals and the properties of it. But yeah, so there's many things that you guys can take away from that. And if you guys have anything to add about the medicinal spring water, feel free to do so in the comments below. Like whether you were healed, or whether like you learned something about it, or whether like you have an experience related to it, or there's something that you would want to emphasize to all the members, and even to me or to P Sky about it too. But one of the things I really want to share was related to an education I heard recently, when that like in prayer, something said to tell your story to God. And I thought this was super interesting. And so this is also related to the writing books part, and like with even with this medicinal spring water too, right? That our story with God is important. Right. And so this is really shocking for me because typically for me, when I pray, I don't really like recount events, or like say a story. Cause like in my mind, like for me, how I think is that my story is one that is shared with God, right? So it's like he and I are on this story together, right? The Trinity and I are on this story together. And it's not like that's wrong, right? But that is true. But we also, have heard many times that, you do have to like you can't just assume God knows everything. You can't like live with God as if he just knows everything. Like, you have to talk to him, and you have to share everything that's on your heart. Right? So I guess this is kind of similar to that, but it said like something was telling us to share our story with God. And so like I saw the value of this, like cuz before, like there were times when especially my parents are praying, or like Korean people are praying, like on behalf of like a group, and they're like recounting everything that happened, and I'm like, dude, like we just we just went through all of that. Why do you have to sit there and like like regurgitate everything that we did? But maybe like it's in some part like this storytelling that we're doing with God. And I think after like all the things that we shared today, it's really making me reevaluate and like to think about this, and to think about this in a deeper way. And I think this is gonna take me some time to practice. And as a final note, like I hope maybe that this is something that each of us can practice too. That we can tell our stories to God, because our stories are where the power is, right? Like with and this is a clear example of this, right? Like without today's segment, and without teaching the JS kids recently, I never would have had occasion to recount that story, because it's not something that I even like to think about, right? And so it only happened, right? Like that story of my friend and our experience in high school, I only recount those stories because right now there's an occasion to with this recording, and also if we were to share our stories with God. Right. And this story with God is important. And this is what he wants to learn from us. And this is where the power is, right? Like we can feel the power even from our own stories. And so when we share with other people, they too will see the power too. Yeah, so I hope that this week adds an actionable item, and as the conclusion for today's episode, that if you guys can pray, pray about your story to God. Pray about like whatever parts of your story, whether it's like a recent part of your story, or like your life story, right? Like whatever like brought you to Providence, like just say it to God. Of course he knows everything. But like, is the prayer even for God? Like, is that prayer even for God? No, that prayer might be for you, right? To remember your story. And so, I hope that this is something that, excites you guys this week. I hope that this is something that you guys can take action on, that each of us can. Since I said it, I have to do it too, right? So, with all this, I really hope that things work out well. And I'm really grateful once again to the Trinity, to our beloved Sons and Kingdom, for making all these things possible, for making the MSC 117.8 possible. And oh, actually, last but not least, I know Pastor Sky talked about this yesterday, but yes, if you do have any questions for the Q&A, right, that's one of the great things that this channel and this outlet, this connection has been for each of us, right? That we get to explore these questions together, and that there's someone like Pastor Sky who's willing to take the time out to try to answer them. It's not to say that everything he says may be correct, right? But is spending the time to help us to explore these questions. So really grateful to him. Definitely grateful to the Trinity, and to our beloved Sons and Him, and to our beloved Lord Jesus Christ, and to each and every one of you guys for everything. So with this, we'll wrap up today's episode of the MSD 117.8 117.8. I can't wait to see you guys next week. Who knows, what may happen. Next week, I have part 2 to the story of today, going into college and actually the more hopeful and the more amazing things about everything that God did to bring me to I'll say bring me to Providence, right? Even though I'm a second gen, like all the things that God did to bring me to Providence will be contained in that story. And so with this, we'll catch you guys on another week's episode of actually, I guess that's how I end 2G Talks, but on next week's MSD 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, I'm on the Morning Star Drive, I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm